You're listening to Alternative Future Radio, home of the weird, resting place of the paranormal. We'll take you to the furthest reaches of the galaxy and beyond. Strange phenomena, aliens, psychics, cryptozoology, conspiracy, holistic health, and UFOs. Alternative Future Radio, where spooky just got weird.
Hello everybody, and welcome once again to the Out There Hour with Basil and Mark. I'm particularly giddy today with our guest. Can you tell?
The Out There Hour on Alternative Future Radio. The Out There Hour with Basil and Mark. www.alternativefutureradio.com.
Yay! That ended abruptly, didn't it?
It did.
I'm quite giddy today. Good morning, Basil.
Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon.
And afternoon to Europe,
Africa,
Middle East, America,
and the world.
And Antarctica. We know you're listening, Antarctica.
We've got a very good guest on.
Yes, Nick Redfern.
Nick Redfern. He's a native of Lancashire, United Kingdom.
Is he really?
He is,
Oh.
I think.
Right.
I'm saying he is anyway.
Okay.
He's now living in Dallas,
Yeah, Dallas, Texas.
30 minutes from the infamous grassy knoll where JFK was sadly assassinated.
Yes, he was indeed.
He's the author of 22 books.
22
I say that,
books.
just 22 books.
Just the 22.
He doesn't look any more than 22 years of age either.
How has he turned out 22
I don't-
books?
Must be short books.
Maybe.
No, they're great books. We've seen them, very interesting books.
Yes.
He's written for journals, magazines, UFO magazine, Fate magazine, and the famous 14 Times.
Yep.
He's also written for the national newspapers. He's written in Great Britain. He's written for the Express.
Mm-hmm.
He's appeared on numerous radio programs.
He's been everywhere. He's written for everybody, and he's been on every radio show.
He's spoken at conferences all across the country.
Yeah.
In the United States.
I think he was at a recent MUFON one, the UFO research people.
We're talking to him today about
UFOs, secret bases. I want to tap him for a bit of information on the Mothman, because I'm quite keen on it. He's got a big whole host of subjects that he talks about.
Yeah, so we're only going to cover a tiny few of them because we're hoping that he'll come back on and talk to us again at some future date.
I'm hoping that the connection's going to hold up today, because I know that there's a storm raging in Dallas today.
Oh boy.
Yeah. We'll see how we
Fingers crossed.
Shall we bring him on?
Let's talk to him.
You know what's coming first?
Ad.
You can help support Alternative Future Radio by purchasing their Android application. With this application, you can download all the latest shows, and you can go back into time and download archived shows. The application is just $1.99, and PayPal will bill you in your usual currency. If you don't use dollars, find out more at alternativefutureradio.com.
Okay, so hopefully we should now be joined on the phone from Dallas, Texas by Nick Redfern. How are you doing there, Nick?
I'm doing good, guys. How's it going?
Brilliant, brilliant. I was in Dallas once. Did I mention that?
Yep.
Nick,
No.
are you?
I want to be here today. It's like nearly 100 degrees.
Oh, really?
I turned up there in August. It was 100 or 110, and it was 100% humidity. Hottest place I've ever been.
Are you very far from the famous grassy knoll there, Nick, where you live in Dallas?
No, not really. About 30 minutes, something like that.
I imagine I went to one of the leafy suburbs in Dallas. Was it Greendale or Greenvale or somewhere like that? I think that's what it was called. It was quite a nice little place.
Greenville?
Greenville, maybe,
Greenville?
yeah. It was nice. I was on Commercial Street on the Pegasus Hotel. I stayed there for a little while.
Okay.
Just up the road from the grassy knoll.
Oh, well, did you figure out anything?
Not far away at all.
Well, it looks like it's all been re-landscaped.
I should probably places change.
Yeah.
Places change.
The school book depository's still there, and there's a little burning flame and things.
Yeah.
Never mind JFK. That's another story
That's
for another day. The story for today, however, is UFOs, cover-ups associated with UFOs, general UFO stuff.
We're with Nick Redfern, as he's just informed us, the author of 22 books.
22 books. If you'd done 22 of anything, generally you'd be seen to have had a problem. That's, I mean...
OCD much?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Are you actually okay, Nick? You know, you can stop, can't you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's not like an obsession. It's, I mean, joking aside, for me, it's like it's an interest, but I don't get, sort of obsessed with it. I have a normal life away from the subject as well.
But you've written on many different subjects.
Yeah, that is true. Mm-hmm. Give us a few of your different subjects, Nick, because I know we're talking about UFOs today, but you've covered a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, mainly I sort of focus on two areas, one being UFOs and the other being cryptozoology, which is the search for unknown animals like Bigfoot and the Chupacabra and the Loch Ness Monster. And so I tend to focus on different aspects of those subjects. So with UFOs, I've written on Area 51, Men in Black, crashed UFO stories, alien contact. And with cryptozoology, I've written books on Bigfoot, on lake monsters, werewolves, you name it. So I kind of sort of mix it up a little bit and just sort of, just write about the things that interest me, and hopefully, they'll interest other people as well. So.
They do.
There was one title I noticed there. I hope I've got it right. Celebrity Secrets. Was that you, Nick?
Yeah, that one's a bit different because that one's nothing to do with sort of paranormal stuff. That was a study of government files on famous people in Hollywood. It's a study of how the FBI secretly watched people like Marilyn Monroe and Frank Sinatra.
John Lennon.
And,
I was thinking this must have been the 50s.
All those sorts of people.
Yeah.
Yeah, sort of 50s, pretty much through the 70s when it was really at its height. And it was everything from, sort of mafia links and, stuff like this, and links with the Kennedys. And, so it was like a historical study of, why and how government agencies watch famous people. So.
Wow.
I might touch on that later on.
Oh, maybe.
Okay, Mark, I'll hand it over to you, because I know you're keen.
You mentioned something there at the very on your little list of topics, Area 51, which is, oddly enough, we did an interview recently with Andrew Johnson. He was talking about 9/11, but he mentioned SAIC, and my ears pricked up because I worked in a company and I was sat next to a group of SAIC people, and I know they got links with Area 51. They do all sorts of interesting research. Area 51 is something that, it's about as mysterious as it is big. What are your thoughts on that? Start on the basics. What do you think is actually going on in Area 51?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, Area 51 is sort of an interesting place. A lot of people think it's in the middle of nowhere. It's actually only less than 90 miles from downtown Las Vegas. Mm-hmm. So it's actually, not as some people think, hundreds of miles into the desert. You could actually be from downtown Las Vegas. You put your foot down, you can be there in just over an hour.
Yeah.
The problem is that when you get within sort of 10, 15 miles of the base, you can be turned round. There are signs warning you that you're approaching prohibited land. There are ground sensors. So in other words, even though it's not a long way away from civilization, you literally cannot get within like 10 miles of the base.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's surrounded by large mountains as well, it's sort of like a very strategic place. Now, of course, what we know for sure about Area 51 is that it's where a lot of the early sort of prototype and radical aircraft the U.S. military would test flown from, things like the U-2, a lot of the early stealth technology.
Blackbirds and such like.
Test flown from Area 51. Yeah. Now, of course, the bigger question is, what else is going on there? And, of course, you have a lot of these stories about crashed UFOs being held there and researched and alien bodies. And, I've done a lot of research into Area 51 and spoke to a lot of people who've said, that outright said that, they've seen crashed UFOs or read files on, alien autopsies at Area 51. And the people come across as genuine and, they can back up their credentials as to who. In that sense, that's what sort of fascinates me, because I think the challenge is when we're looking into all these issues is to try and find out, where the treasure, so to speak, is hidden.
Yeah.
And Area 51 would be the ideal place, because it's so strategically fortified and guarded, and in terms of people not being able to get there, it would be the ideal place. So, I think in that sense, the stories make sense. But the problem is, how do we prove what's going on there?
Yeah.
When it's so well guarded, when no files have ever surfaced, photographs, etc., that we can conclusively say this or that. That's where the problem is. It doesn't mean there's nothing to it. It's like the challenge is to take things to the next step and be able to prove it. And I think that's where the UFO subject has kind of hit a stumbling block or a brick wall. We've got the testimony about what could be going on at Area 51, but how do we prove it? That's the big challenge, I think.
Have you visited Area 51, no doubt, Nick, yourself?
Well, the edges, maybe.
Yeah, the edges.
I've got about as close as you can legally get, which, and in saying that, I mean, all you can sort of see is sand, desert, and mountains and signs telling you not to go any further.
Nick,
and that's the problem.
If it's so close to civilization, to Las Vegas and other places, how come they fly the staff in every day from is it from Groom Lake that they leave the flights every day? Well, why would you fly in if it's so close?
No, but they're actually flying from McCarran Airport in Vegas. That's the big airport in Vegas. A lot of the people who work at Area 51 either live in Vegas or they rent rooms or whatever there.
Yeah.
So they're flown in from McCarran Airport. But I guess the main reason is that if they want them there early. A 90-mile trip is still like an hour and a half, where a flight can be like.
I imagine it's easier to control airspace than roads as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, the thing is, it's actually illegal to fly over, not just Area 51, but the whole Groom Range. I mean, Area 51 is actually part of something called the Nevada Test Range.
Yeah.
The Nevada Test Range, in terms of square mileage, is literally, it's like 3,000 square miles. It's huge. And you have various sections on the Nevada Test Range, of which Area 51 is just one of them. But to fly over the entire range is illegal unless you've got permission. You can actually be shot down. So, however you try and get to Area 51, you're not going to stand much of a chance. And, I actually don't recommend people do, because, there's literally nothing to see. It's okay saying, I've been on the road and I've got within 10 miles of it, but, at the end of the day, you still haven't seen anything. And that's why I think if we're going to find the answers, it's going to be the witnesses and the people who used to work there who are probably going to give us a better insight as to what's going on, rather than, sort of hiring a car for the day and trundling out into the desert or whatever.
Am I remembering right? Did somebody once get in there to some extent on a hang glider or something like that? Did they coast in on a microlight or... I think somebody did.
I don't know that story at all.
Yeah, I think I read about that when I was...
I don't know that story, though.
Yeah, fair enough. You can actually, of course, see some of Area 51 from Google Earth. You can see a little bit.
Yeah, you can. I mean, that's one of the ironic things, is that, it's sort of super secret installation, and yet you can find aerial photographs on the internet. There's some satellite pictures, Google Earth pictures. Again, with resolution and, the fact that a lot of what goes on at Area 51, is either undertaken actually underground, there are extensive underground parts to the base, or in hangars. And people have also spoken about some of the mountains being sort of like quarried out, so hollowed out, and, sort of buildings inside. So in other words, unless you're really lucky and you happen to see something reeled out of a hangar or whatever, it's kind of like everything's behind closed doors or underground anyway. So.
I'd imagine that a place such as that would be more than aware of when those satellites pass over to make sure that nothing is on display at that time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, actually, a story surfaced a few years ago about how, the staff there and the personnel knew when Soviet spy satellites back in the 80s were going over, and they would ensure that, nothing was going on outside of the hangars at certain peak times of the day when the satellites were going over. So.
And the Soviets did exactly the same thing. They wheeled out papier-mâché missiles and things like that to make sure the Americans took photographs of them. They were doing the same kind of thing.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, we know that's been done at Area 51, where mock-ups have been, put out, and then just to confuse the enemy or whatever as to what's going on there, or to direct them away from one part of the base to another, to make it look like
I just find
something significant's going on at a place which is just desert, So.
I find it amusing that you mentioned Google Earth.
Yeah.
One of the unusual images, I don't know if I sent it to you, it's that base shaped like a swastika. That building shaped like a swastika.
I forgot where that is.
A perfect swastika. I've forgotten where it is and what it is, Mark.
I think it was the IRS building or something like that.
Nick, have you seen that one?
No, I don't think I've seen that.
Oh, we've got to send you that.
You must find that one out.
That's one you could probably write a book on.
Yeah. Nick, we had...
No, that's weird.
Yeah, it is weird.
I had a teacher at school, and we've mentioned him before, actually, and he was a little bit of a renegade, and he taught us about all sorts of things, and one of the things he was talking about was Roswell, and we also touched on, I think, Area 51, believe it or not. And he maintained, our renegade teacher, that there was a great leap in technology from valves to transistors around about that time, which I think he was alluding to being acquired technology, shall we say. Have you any thoughts on that? Because I think it was Texas Instruments that invented the microchip, was it, or the transistorized one? What do you think about that? Have we acquired technology, and does that go on in Area 51? Because I think they're in the right part of the world for it.
Yeah, I mean, this is sort of an interesting angle. I mean, back in 1997, a guy named Colonel Philip Corso, who was in his 80s at the time, came out and wrote a book called The Day After Roswell. And basically, his book was an expose of that whole angle. He said that in the early 60s, he was exposed to the material recovered at Roswell back in the 40s, and said that he learned and expanded upon the way in which supposedly the technology found at Roswell was sort of seeded secretly into U.S. defense contractors, who then sort of tried to replicate and understand the technology and develop it for, U.S. military purposes. He said that everything from transistors to night vision and all sorts of other stuff was, sort of back-engineered, if you like, from the Roswell materials. Now, it's a controversial story, and, Corso has as many believers as he does have detractors. But, I mean, what I would say is that it would make perfect sense that, if you get your hands on a crashed UFO, you're not just going to store it away.
No.
You're going to want to understand how it works, why it works, and what you can learn from it, and if you can duplicate it before the enemy does that. The big question I kind of have is to what extent we would be able to duplicate technology that's so far in advance of us.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, you imagine, if you were to sort of time travel a car from the 21st century back to the 1800s, they might actually, they'd understand it was a vehicle, they could push it along with the wheels and turn the steering wheel. But if they hadn't got access to, to petrol and oil, when the car runs out of petrol, then, they're in a mess, they're in a fix.
Yeah.
How would they make it go? And I think that's possibly, one of the big challenges about potential alien technology is not so much understanding it, but whether or not we can actually even replicate it, and fuel it. If it's fueled by something really weird, and we don't have the ability to duplicate it, when we maybe just be scratching our heads. Ironically, there might be guys at Area 51 who have got crashed UFOs, but, all they can kind of do is sort of scratch their heads and knock on the metal and think, what do we do with it? It's sat there. So.
It is very strange that they should go from glass tubes with hot wire in them to transistors. It is a hell of a leap. Would you not think?
Oh, it is. No, you're right. There's no doubt that in sort of the 40s onwards, that there has been a huge leap in technology, and it's interesting that it ties in period-wise with how the whole UFO subject kicked off in 47 as well. So I think it's an important area to research. I mean, we know historically that the transistor was being developed before Roswell occurred, but some people say, well, maybe the technology from Roswell kick-started it even further, jump-started it rather than originated, if you like. So.
Yeah, I mean, if we were in a position where we'd got, for example, a UFO in our hands, as you say, first of all, we might work out how the door opens and how the seat works or whatever, and they could in turn reveal bits of technology. And as you say, it could take years to get to a stage where you could understand what the things were for, never mind how they work. And it's possible, one would speculate, that we could have been gradually decoding how this works for the last 50 years.
Well, yeah, I mean, 50 years isn't a long time to sort of go from, having propeller-driven aircraft to trying to understand alien technology, Part of the secrecy might be that we've got a lot of material or data, but not many answers. A lot of people often assume, maybe we give the government too much credit that they have all the answers. Maybe they've got a lot of materials, debris, bodies stored away, but they really don't have a full understanding of the science behind it, so they just lock it behind closed doors and hope that one day, we'll catch up to where our technology comes close to being able to understand it, and until then, they sort of cloak it in secrecy.
Well, the American government certainly had a lot of the ex-Nazi scientists, rocket scientists, anyway. We're aware of that much.
Yeah, I mean, in 40, that's the other interesting thing, is that, when the whole UFO thing kicked off, you got all these German scientists brought over to the US through something called Operation Paperclip. These were the guys who built the V2 rockets that bombed, Britain during the Second World War.
Yeah.
They came over, so they sort of kick-started domestic rocket technology in the US as well. So.
I mean, some people think that some of the UFOs may be based on the German design.
There were German designs that looked very similar. Very shaped craft, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I actually agree with that. I think, the UFO issue, I think, is two things. I think there's a genuinely unknown UFO phenomenon, but I think also the government has been building its own very weird-looking, highly advanced craft as well, that it probably is happy for us to think are UFOs because it acts as a good cover. So I think there are like their UFOs and there are our UFOs as well.
I mean, with the Blackbird and the stealth bomber and what have you, as you say, they were more than happy for us to report mysterious black triangles in the air, because they managed to keep that hushed up for better part of a decade, I think, in the stealth bomber's case. But going back to the Germans, are you aware of the... there's like a platform in Germany that the Nazis left behind, and it's like a ring up in the air, and it looks like it might have been some kind of inductance ring or something like that, and there's a big power supply running to it. I saw it on a documentary recently, and it looks like it would be a place to test a disc-shaped launcher or something along those lines. Have you seen that? Do you know anything about it? I don't know much myself.
Yeah, I have seen that. I mean, there's no doubt that the Germans were working on all sorts of radical things during the Second World War.
Yeah.
Whether it's highly advanced aircraft, rumours of circular-shaped aircraft, they had plans to even, sort of launch rockets into space. This was back in sort of the 40s, Had the war not come to an end, they probably would have done. So, I don't rule out at all, and in fact I think it's quite valid that they probably were working on circular-shaped aircraft that were secretly brought to the US, and that's why I think the UFO subject is so difficult to explain, because there is this sort of angle of there's somebody else's UFOs and there's ours, and sometimes the two mysteries get combined to where, we're not sure which UFOs are genuinely unexplained and which are part of some secret military project, and people sometimes want it to be one or the other, whereas I actually think it's both. So.
This is something I was just thinking of. If Germany was so far in front back then, in much the same way that America mysteriously... Oh, we seem to have had a little bit of a cut out there.
That's all right. We'll just go on and we'll pause for a break. And
let's have a little bit of a break, and we'll run probably a little loud. We'll try and get Nick back on again, because I believe he's got some sort of thunderstorms going on in Dallas at the moment, so hope he's all right. Should we have a little lad?
Let's have a little lad.
Why not?
You should probably help support this station by buying the new Alternative Future Radio Android application. You can download all the latest programs or the archived shows, and it's just $1.99. PayPal will bill you in your usual currency if you don't use dollars. Find out more at AlternativeFutureRadio.com.
Okay, I think we've got Nick back on the line. Do we have you there, Nick? hopefully.
Yep, fingers crossed.
The storms are raging in Texas today, it seems, and so we're fighting against it on all fronts. Where were we before? I was just about to ask you a question, Nick. America took pretty much, it's safe to say, the lion's share of the technology out of Germany post-World War II and did quite well out of that. But then, should we be asking the question, not did America do well out of it because of maybe something they found in Roswell, shall we say, but where the hell did the Germans get the technology from? Because they were a quantum leap in front of everybody else. Maybe we should be looking for a crash site in Germany, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually a very good question, as to where the Germans got their things from. I mean, there's no doubt they had a lot of very brilliant scientists. I mean, Werner von Braun, who was one of their major scientists, actually became director of NASA.
Yeah.
And he was the brains behind the V2 that bombed Britain, and he became director of NASA.
Sounds unlikely.
It's not something that. Yeah, but I mean, it's like truth is sometimes stranger than fiction. But there are people who said, well, maybe the Germans had their own Roswell, years earlier,
yes,
and that they kind of, or maybe they just were so brilliant, that they actually did perfect some really weird-looking aircraft at the same time that somebody else was flying around as well.
What has happened historically, from what I can gather, is countries which are isolated generally evolve in a different direction to others. I recently heard tell of Iran. They have been excluded from all the military hardware around the world, so they've had to invent everything from scratch. And as such, they've had to rediscover the wheel. And they've actually got a torpedo that does like 100 knots in water, which puts it about 5 times faster than anything that anybody else has got. Oh, bugger. We're struggling today with the storms in Dallas, everybody.
Let's have another little advert.
Oh, good grief. Do we have more than one? Let's do it.
You can help support Alternative Future Radio by purchasing their Android application. With this application, you can download all the latest shows. And you can go back into time and download archived shows. The application is just $1.99, and PayPal will bill you in your usual currency. If you don't use dollars, find out more at alternativefutureradio.com.
Oh dear. It seems that Nick's connection is not working. We tried to call him a few times, but oh dear.
Well, we've been chatting.
It's one of those awkward radio moments.
We've been chatting with...
where the guest drops off his perch.
We've been chatting with Nick briefly.
Yeah, briefly.
We thought we'd have a little chat amongst ourselves while waiting for him to come back on.
In fairness, he did warn us when we first called him that the electric had been off there about 8 or 10 times in the last few hours.
I'll tell you about Nick. He's written 22 books.
Yeah, plenty.
He's written articles for the 14 Times. UFO magazine.
No wonder he knows Jonathan Downes.
Fate magazine, and even the national newspapers, as the Express.
Yeah, oh yeah.
But this journal now, the 14 Times.
Yeah.
What do you think of that, Mark? Have you read it?
14 Times. I've never actually bought a copy because I don't think they have it here. I've seen it on the shelf in England, but I don't know. Do they have it here? Have you seen it?
Oh, they have it here.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
I've seen their website, and it's all very interesting stuff. They do cover quite a lot. I've used it as a source for information and interesting things to talk about since we've been on, and it's quite good, actually.
I bring up the magazine the 14 Times because I have read it, although I'm not an avid reader.
Yeah.
But literally all of our guests have written articles for it.
Really?
At one point or another.
Lionel Franthorpe, the priest, he had a TV program called Fortean TV, I think.
Ah, he did.
And that's what got me onto that. I'd never heard the word Fortean until that program came on TV, and that was very, very similar to the 14 Times. He just covered all sorts of unknown, weird stories and things.
Lionel would cover the paranormal, demonic possession.
UFOs.
Oh, UFOs as well.
Oh, yeah, he did all sorts of stuff.
But they say there's
legends.
They say there's a connection, and I think actually now Nick would say there is a connection between the paranormal and the ufologists.
We're going to have to ask him that if we're getting back on.
If we ever get him back on.
If we have him, I'm hoping he's all right. There's no... I
hope a tree hasn't fallen on him or anything, because as you were saying, a lot of our guests...
God, yeah, we mentioned that before we came on air.
We're a bit like Father Ted, that episode where he keeps ringing people.
Never watched it.
They have an accident because they answer his phone and they die tragically. That's the joke.
Yeah, no, I've been looking for guests to have on the show on a variety of subjects, it has to be said, and more than I imagined were deceased. And I was just saying that to Nick before we came on. Maybe I shouldn't have mentioned it. Maybe he's got a bit of worry on now. I don't know.
Were they particularly old, or?
Well, now, in fairness, some of them were.
Yeah.
Some of them were of the right age to shuffle off the coil, but not all of them. And some of them weren't, that old. I mean, they were in their early 60s and things. I mean, it's possible to die at that age, but
it is.
More people live longer than that than don't.
It's young in this day and age, but then young people die now as well. Should we try him again, or is it too early to try him?
Shall we give him a quick bell?
We'll just drop him into the conversation.
Yeah, we'll just drop him in, see if it works. I hope we don't get the voicemail for the plumbing.
For the plumbing side. Well, we'll leave that in as well. It's quite funny.
Let's give it a go. Oh dear, let's see.
I wanted to ask him about the celebrity secrets as well.
I want to hear the connection between demonic possession and UFOs. That's did
good. You not know about that?
Do we have you there?
Oh,
Nick.
Hi, Nick.
Nick, we got you back. You're alive and well. You've not been added to our guest statistics.
No, it's going on and off, and I don't know what's going on.
We'll bear with you as we're already recording, so we'll bear with you as long as we can.
We were just chatting amongst ourselves, and
we just carried on without you.
I was just mentioning to Mark, I was listening to a previous interview with you, and I said that I understood that you think there's some connection between was it the paranormal and UFOs?
That's interesting. That's a new one.
Sorry, between what? You broke up a bit then.
Sorry, the paranormal and UFOs. You seem to tie them up like I
do. I think there's there's definitely crossovers between certain aspects of the paranormal and a lot of these sort of things I investigate. I mean, this is sort of going off at a tangent a little bit. I mean, there's places in Texas where there's a lot of Bigfoot activity, where UFO activity occurs at exactly the same time.
Interesting.
It's like with the Mothman site. You mentioned Mothman earlier.
Yeah.
Well, when the Mothman sightings were at the height in the 60s, people who were seeing Mothman were also getting visited by the Men in Black. I think there's a lot of crossovers between these different phenomena that, they might not be as sort of separate as a lot of people assume. So.
Could it be that, say, the Bigfoot is of extraterrestrial origin or part of an experiment of some sort, and same with the Mothman and maybe other things too? I mean, it's
some people do think that. I mean,
you're dealing with the unknown. It's certainly it meets the facts.
I think the problem is that people have been separating these subjects: paranormal, UFO, cryptozoology, and maybe we should be blending them together a bit. Because, as Nick says, to have
people.
Sorry, Nick.
People like John Keel, that's what they did. Keel was someone who thought that all these different phenomena had one original point of origin, whatever it might be. He wasn't convinced they were necessarily extraterrestrial. He was more like, he was looking at sort of ultra-dimensional and extra-dimensional, and that something that sort of coexisted with us.
Right.
That rather than coming from planet A or B, which in some sense it makes more sense because, instead of zipping back and forth from one star system, you kind of, it's like retuning your radio from one station to another. You zip in from one dimension to another.
But UFO abductees and contactees are saying something a little bit differently these days that they haven't been saying before. They're not talking about men from outer space. They're talking about beings from other dimensions. It's not so much. It's not so much other planets now. They're talking about other dimensions.
Yeah, there is a bit of a pattern there, certainly.
There is a pattern emerging.
Yeah, and I think, I'll be the first to admit, the extraterrestrial angle is a theory because, we don't really have the answers, so we try and pigeonhole it into a framework that, we can understand because people know the idea, the imagery of aliens visiting the Earth, etc. But I think, it's just as feasible that we could be looking at something that, as I said, does sort of coexist in some of the realm of existence that we don't possibly understand fully, but that could be explainable, via extra dimensions rather than, as I said, coming from a star that's 4 light years away or 10 light years away. And maybe that explains, why some of these other weird creatures as well, like Mothman, seem to just 1 minute they're here and the next minute they're gone. Or that's because they literally are. They flit in and out of our reality, perhaps. So.
Absolutely.
Certainly seems plausible. I mean, I'm looking on your website, and let me get the name right. Nick Redfern. No, let me get this right. Nick Redfern14.blogspot. No, I think I've got the wrong one here. What's your website again, Nick? Give us it there.
No, that's the one. That's the one.
It is nickredfern14.blogspot.com.
That's the one. Yeah.
Yeah. There's an ad on the side here for one of your many books. Has to be said, for your book about top secret places the government doesn't want you to know about, called Keep Out.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
Now, we started off on Area 51.
A study of,
sorry, I was just saying we started off on Area 51, but there are obviously lots of these kinds of places.
Yeah, I mean, everybody, when you talk about sort of secret bases with UFO links, everybody thinks of Area 51, but I mean, in the US alone, there are several others, Hangar 18, there's a story of an underground installation at Dulce, New Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
There are a place called Pine Gap in Australia.
Yes.
Russia has its own equivalents.
Mm-hmm.
There's places all around the world that, there are sort of off-limits installations which have sort of UFO and alien links to them. So.
I had some first-hand information given to me once a long time ago from somebody I pretty much trust that told me that there was at least one base that they knew of in the UK that could house 50,000 people on a semi-permanent basis, but for a long-term basis, shall we say.
Yeah, there's a place actually in Wiltshire, called the Defence Communications Network, and that can house thousands of people in the event of a national emergency. It's actually the whole area that surrounds the Defence Communications Network and RAF Rudloe Manor. Mm-hmm. The whole area was quarried out underground to build the city of Bath. They dug out a load of stone called Bath stone.
Yeah.
So you had these huge open caverns and caves, and the government decided in the 50s, it'd be a good place for have like an emergency command centre. And again, this is one of several that exist in the UK, deep underground, and that whole area around Wiltshire is like a hub of underground areas. You've also got Porton down there and Boscombe down, and lots of different places. So.
I heard a story a couple of years ago from somebody, and it was a taxi driver, I think it was, that told me this. They were dropping off a number of people in seemingly the middle of nowhere in Yorkshire, and they couldn't work out why they were dropping these people off in suits, basically in a field, right next to a field. And apparently what had happened was there used to be a government installation deep underground, and what they'd done is they'd sold it, and they sold it to Halifax Bank, who decided that they'd use it for their secure data storage facility in case everything should go belly up. And there were lots of people working in there. They were all in office jobs and things like that, working deep underground in a bank. And nobody knew this thing was there at all until well after it was sold and these people had moved in. Absolutely crazy.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people don't realise, particularly the height of the Cold War, how many underground areas were constructed, whether bunkers, emergency command centres, just to store materials, safe havens for, top government people, that sort of thing. Some of them still exist, others have been sold off and closed down, but I'm sure there's quite a few that we just never really knew about.
I saw a documentary about one, an ex-nuclear bunker network, it has to be called. It's not really a bunker, it was a big installation right under London. You accessed it via what is now a shop.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of people don't realise this. Back in the 40s, some of the old London Underground stations that had been closed down were reconverted into, again, emergency management systems. Winston Churchill actually had one of the old stations reconverted into an emergency place, in the event that Downing Street, etc., got bombed. So, in other words, these places are sort of dotted all over the place. And, that's just Britain, or America. There's, as I said, Australia, China, Russia, everybody's got them. And it's understandable, because, if you want to protect yourself and whatever secrets you hide in, underground is the best way to do it. So.
What are some of these other bases then? I mean, you mentioned Pine Gap. I've heard of that. What are the theories surrounding that? I don't know much about Pine Gap.
Well, Pine Gap is in Australia, not too far from the town of Alice Springs, and it's kind of like, it's the Australian equivalent of GCHQ in England, which is basically the government communications headquarters, which gets involved in not sort of like spying with sending guys out on the streets or whatever, but, sort of surveillance in terms of electronic surveillance, emails, computer hacking, phone tapping, that sort of thing. And that's what Pine Gap does. But what's interesting is that there have been a lot of UFO sightings in and around the Pine Gap area, so it's like an Australian Area 51, in the sense there's a lot of military stuff going on there, but people are seeing weird stuff flying around as well.
Now, Alice Springs, if I remember correctly, is bang in the middle of Australia, isn't it? It's 1,000 miles from anywhere.
Yeah, again, this is why, some of these places in larger countries, they're chosen for their...
It's the ping. Oh, we're just getting going there again. Pine Gap.
We'll get back on the line now in
Shall we try again?
several minutes.
Yeah, we'll give him a minute, and then we'll try again for his phone system to reboot. Wow, we're up against it today. Some people of a suspicious nature would say that it was, suspicious.
Do you think so? They don't want him...
Maybe. Some people say that. We've had somebody say worse.
We don't want the info getting out.
Oh, the info, yeah. Watch the info, everybody.
Should we play an ad?
Oh. You mean the ad?
Or a song?
We could play a song. If you want to go with a song.
Go with a song.
Okay, song time.
I think I know what it's going to be too.
No, you don't.
Huh?
That was my old mate.
Oh no, it wasn't Rick Van Man, was it?
Yes.
I didn't mean that, Rick. Sorry. I didn't know.
You savage.
Oh, God.
You savage.
He's the only one who talks to us.
But that's it. No more comments on YouTube videos for you.
He'll never enter another competition again. Just edit that bit out.
And he listens to every show.
Edit it. He
listens to every show.
Edit that out. Edit it out. I was only joking, Rick. I knew it was you.
It's still going.
I was merely jesting.
Oh, dear.
I knew you'd be listening.
He only opens his mouth to change feet. Shall we call Nick back? And
Let's have a go at talking to Nick
We'll have
again.
one last try, shall we?
This is fun.
Yeah. It's like live radio, but somehow managing to be worse.
But worse, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, normally when it's recorded, the whole idea is that it's easy street.
What were we talking about, Nick?
Pine Gap.
Pine Gap. It was
Yeah.
a military base or a secret base or...
Yeah. UFO sightings there, that kind of thing.
Yeah, what about Rendlesham with
Rendlesham. You mean.
Rendlesham, would Nick know anything about that? Or?
I'd say he probably would,
Yeah.
actually. It's pretty well known. And there's the Wales one as well. Nick...
You've reached Interline Plumbing and...
Oh, dear. We don't need any plumbing.
Do you need a plumber?
No.
Give him a ring.
I think I've seen that film, but no, I don't. I'd say that means his internet or whatever it is, his voice has gone completely belly
I
up.
think so. Well,
Storm
never
is
mind.
raging.
It's been... it's been wonderful.
It's been wonderful for the listeners to hear us dying live on air.
For the 20 minutes that we spoke to Nick.
Basically, we've been dying and then being resuscitated. Have 10 minutes with Nick, then die, and then resuscitated.
We'll probably have to try and get Nick back at some future date.
Talk about the paranormal. We're basically like zombie presenters at this stage. We've died so many times.
Yeah, it's getting difficult.
Yeah.
I want to ask him a bit about the 14 times, maybe working on that.
Yeah.
I never ask any of them.
Then again, you could ask any of our guests about that, because most of them, as you say, have been on it.
Most of them have been on it. The government spends millions. Why do governments spend millions on ESP and paranormal? And
That is true, they do.
Yeah, they must be quite interested. They must be.
Guess who started that lot, though? That was another Nazi project. The Nazis spent big on
You're
paranormal.
so right. You're so right when you say that.
Yeah, they did ESP, paranormal, remote viewing, all their projects, their babies. Again, it begs the question, were they just brilliant scientists, or did they have help or intervention?
Yeah.
It seems unlikely that one nation, not a particularly big or powerful nation, remember at the time, when Hitler took control, Germany was on its knees. Really, would it be more likely that they came up with all these innovations? I don't know.
Or what, alien help?
Maybe.
Is that what you're saying?
Could have been help.
It could well have been.
They could have dug something up, for example. For example, here's another one. Hitler was really big into the whole Egyptology and ancient...
relics,
holy
and
relics,
yeah.
Maybe he dug something up.
Should we give him one more?
Took it to
Should we give him
bits.
one more tap there and just see if we can get him on? Because it'd be a shame. Even for 10 minutes.
We'll give it one more go, yeah.
Even just say goodbye.
Wouldn't it be interesting if Hitler had dug something up that was interesting, took it to bits, reverse engineered it, and come up with all the amazing machines
It's certainly a possibility.
Yeah. Very, very strange.
It's not one that I've noticed been really covered very much.
No, I don't think so, actually.
The,
I'd love to see somebody make a documentary or write a book about the technology from the Germans and potential sources for said technology.
That's right.
That would be interesting.
The landing site you mentioned, I've seen as well.
Yeah, it's like a ring or something like that. Have we got in there? No.
No, we've just got the plumber again.
Oh, dear.
The Mothman Prophecies.
I wanted to talk about the
Do you know,
Mothman.
I've seen the film The Mothman Prophecies
Richard Gere.
with Richard Gere, and it's odd. I know there was a monster involved, and people were coming across in at night. They were they were coming across this big
I think
horrible.
I think it was based on, was it John Keel? He was talking about him briefly. He actually went to that town.
Yeah.
And he was a bona fide journalist, if I read correctly. I was
I'm sure, yeah.
And I think it was kind of roughly based on his experiences, unless he was doing it the other way around, I'm not sure. But it was basically like a harbinger of doom.
That's what I'm going to say.
Yeah.
You saw that, and then something terrible happened.
That made him a good guy. That made the Mothman a good guy.
He was warning you.
That's good.
Or was he making it happen?
If I told you your house was going to burn down, you'd go, "Oh, thank you very much. I'll go and make sure I, get a hose or a fire extinguisher or something."
I got the impression in the movie that it wasn't a good
Yeah,
thing, though.
bad things followed him rather than he was a warning. Yeah. But again, without knowing full well, you don't know. For all we know, he was a good guy. Come to tell us to watch out. Your bridge is falling down.
Yeah, perhaps.
You know?
Yeah.
People assume that, because this is interesting. Watching a documentary about him just the other day, because I've been desperate to get somebody who want to talk about the Mothman. They said, "Oh yeah, we were driving down the road and we saw these big red eyes, and that's all we could see." And I thought to myself, surely without a head attached to them, how did you know they were eyes?
Yeah, well,
two big red lights is what
it could have been in his chest.
Yeah, I mean,
is that what you mean?
They could have also been tail lights on a car, for all I know, or a helicopter. But I mean, eyes are only eyes when they're on your head or in your body in some form. So how can you have only seen the eyes? You must have to see a body to work out the fact that they're eyes.
I'd assume they would have saw some humanoid shape.
Yeah, that's not what they were saying, though. Yeah, it's
No.
not what they were saying. So, I mean, I don't know. It seems very strange.
We can't
to
jump
me.
to conclusions, you see, when we're seeing things.
This is it.
the problem.
People see things, and again, very recently, somebody was talking about having seen a UFO, and it was clearly Jupiter. Because it was high in the sky and bright. Remember a couple of weeks ago,
I do.
last
I remember
month,
you mentioning that.
it was brilliant in the sky, and you could see it.
And
Did
do you know
see
what?
it?
Do you know what? Wasn't it just as exciting to see Jupiter?
It's
Isn't that
pretty
amazing?
Big. It's pretty bright, pretty big. Venus was out at the same time, and they were almost following each other across the sky.
Nice.
People were looking at it. I tell you what, I described to somebody just the other day. The space station, the ISS, it comes over, and you can see it every month or so for a few days in a row, and it can come over. And this is a bit of a weird thing. It can almost appear above you, move across the sky, appear to stop, change directions, and then go back down the horizon in another
space
angle.
station?
Yeah, the ISS,
Okay.
yeah. It can go back down the sky at a different angle and then also disappear without getting to the horizon. And it's just one of the quirks of atmospherics and how its orbit appears when you're on the ground. It might sort of come up, say, here and go over and then turn like that, but it might just appear and then disappear. And it would be very, very easy to think that was a UFO or something like that. There's a lot of people mistake the ISS for UFOs, I'd say.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. Shall we try Nick one last time before we pack up?
Yeah, I think we should.
Right, hang on, let's set that off.
We'll give him a chance.
Yeah, interesting chap. 22 books.
Interesting chap and a pity that there's a storm in Dallas. Is that right?
I read the weather this morning because that's how dedicated I am, and I realised there was a storm there, so I thought we might have trouble. That rang very quickly. Have we got you on the line, Nick?
Hello.
Oh, we got you back again. How are you doing? Are you still surviving?
Just.
Oh, good grief! It must be raging over there, this storm.
No, it's actually not. It's just what's happening is that it's when it gets sort of like really hot and whatever and muggy, that it's just cutting in and out, and I don't know what's causing it, but when the sky kind of rumbles, it's just going off on and off.
Maybe it's an electrical storm.
But yeah, that's what it is. Something's down somewhere, I think. So.
So we were just talking about Pine Gap before our last interruption. Any ideas from yourself? What's going on at Pine Gap? Would you like to hazard a guess or punt a theory?
Well, I mean, we know they do. We know they're heavily involved in like electronic surveillance. Spy satellites, monitoring emails, phone calls, that sort of thing.
Who owns Pine Gap, Nick?
There's been a lot of. What's that?
Who owns Pine Gap? Because I can't imagine the Australians being big into surveillance, or is it? Is it?
Well, yeah, they do. It's an Australian installation, but it's made up of partly Australian personnel and partly US personnel from the National Security Agency.
Ah, yes.
But it is an Australian installation, and they're heavily involved in, monitoring what's going on, and but there's been a lot of UFO activity in the area. Now, of course, people wonder, is it like we discussed earlier? Is it UFOs or is it some sort of, secret surveillance type craft that are being built?
Mm-hmm.
We only have to look at what's being flown now. Like these pilotless drones that look like sort of mini UFOs. They look weird. So again, I think we could be looking at two things at Pine Gap. There could be real UFO activity, but for the sightings of weird craft to be made in a base that's steeped in surveillance work, I wouldn't be at all surprised if some of these things aren't like sort of mini remotely piloted drone type aircraft that are being used more and more, not for sort of spying overseas, but for spying on the general public in their own countries. Do you know what I mean? It's more like a 1984 Big Brother type situation.
Yes. Speaking of 1984, the Men in Black. I've heard this mentioned. I know the movie The Men in Black, but I don't know anything else about the Men in Black.
Yeah, they were an old phenomena, weren't they? And only recently have resurfaced in the alternative media even.
Well, yeah, a lot of people assume that the Men in Black were just like a creation of Hollywood, with the Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones films in the 90s and then the new one right now. But actually not. The movies were based on existing reports going back to the 40s of people who claimed that after having sort of prominent UFO encounters, they were visited by these guys in black suits who warned them not to talk about, their UFO encounters. And, the theories for who the Men in Black are sort of weird and intriguing as the phenomenon itself. Some people think it's all government people, like in the movies. Other people point out that a lot of these Men in Black are described as being sort of very skinny, pale, with bulging eyes, and they look, only sort of 5 foot tall, very skinny and white. And some people suggest, could they be like aliens themselves, rather than even human? Or could it be two categories? There's the weirder Men in Black, and then there's the government's Men in Black, and so it's a very weird phenomenon, but it's also a lot older than many people even realise.
It's interesting you should say category of Men in Black, because, my goodness, over the last several months here, the category of aliens that we've heard about from various sources
is getting wider.
And we don't know what during your research, what is the classic alien, or what is there one type, or is there more, or?
Well, there are a couple of types. I mean, certainly the main one, is this sort of typical small 3 to 4 foot tall creature with the large head and the big black eyes, that are primarily linked with alien abductions.
The grey.
Not exclusively, the greys, yeah. But, if you go back to the 50s, people were talking about encounters with very human-looking aliens. Then, of course, you have people talking about the so-called reptilians, these sort of reptile, lizard-looking creatures. So, in other words, you could argue that, you take 10 people off the street, you find one guy who's got long hair, somebody else who's got a beard, and they look different. Somebody's 5 foot tall, somebody's 6'4". So, I think in that sense, it would make sense that if there are aliens out there, they're going to look as different as the human race does. I think
that's a good point.
A fair point it's a theoretical point, but it's a fair point as well, I think.
I'm a bit surprised there that you mentioned about alien sightings back in the 40s. Did you say that? Because I wasn't aware that there was sightings that early. The first I know of is the Barney and Betty Hill incident, and that was the first time that a grey was actually described, and that was in the early 60s.
Yeah, that's pretty much when the whole phenomenon of the smaller aliens were reported. But you can go back to the late 40s, early 50s, and there were a lot of reports, particularly from the California desert, Arizona desert, of people claiming to have met very human-like aliens in the desert. Granted, they weren't the sort of small greys, but they were more like us, and those reports then kind of died away, and then the sort of the greys replaced them. Although we still get some of that other category today, but certainly to a lesser extent. And even today, the grey reports are less than they were back in the 80s. 80s to early 90s abductions were huge.
Yes,
even they've kind of dropped off. It's almost as if the phenomenon, over the years, sort of changes.
They say contactee now.
Yeah,
more people feel they're being contacted than abducted.
Yeah, abductions or abductee is a good description for some of the cases. People do talk about being sort of whisked away and taken somewhere against their will and treated like a lab rat. But there are other cases where it seems a person's being given a message, or to get out to people as if, they're being used as, like a message, a voice for whatever these entities are. And, that in itself is interesting, the idea that, that there might be something beyond just kidnapping people, that it's actually a way of getting the message across of these entities, but using people to do it.
Most of the messages now apparently are pertaining to 2012 at the moment.
We've heard a couple of those, yeah. But here we are.
Well, the whole 2012 thing's interesting, and I guess, so people say, what do you think of it? Well, I always say, well, we haven't got long to wait. We're going to find out soon anyway if anything's going to happen or not.
It's only 6 months away now.
Yeah, it's almost here.
Right. It's not like we've got to... it's not like we've got to spend the next 6 years writing books and pondering on it,
Although I'm sure you'll have knocked out a couple of books by December.
Well, I guess the other argument is if the world's going to end, it's like, what's the point?
There's no point.
I guess we'll wait and see. If New Year's Eve comes around, then everything's going to be good, I think.
Going back to the 50s, as you were talking about the Men in Black and the 50s and that era, before more modern times, it reminded me of the UFO sightings over the White House, over Washington. That was, I think, 1954, I think, wasn't it? That was a famous one. That's a really tricky one to explain away, because there's no CGI in 1954.
No, that's right. I mean, the 50s, you can go back to that whole decade, and there was a massive wave of very good, credible encounters where, the military chased UFOs, and they were tracked on radar at the same time, and pilots were sent up to intercept them. And, I think what it sort of demonstrates more than anything else is sort of the way in which this phenomenon really, is powerful, in the sense that even our military back then, never mind today or whatever, just it could run rings around it, and I think a lot of it was like a show of power. There was never outright hostility, but it was almost as if to say, hey, whatever we want to do, we can do, and, you're powerless to stop us. And probably the best show of force is to turn up over a major city, run rings around the military, and then vanish, and then leave people with the idea that, wow, these things are way in front of us, and if they wanted to do damage, they could do. And I think possibly that was the intent and the message behind it all. Yeah,
there's been lots of that kind of thing going on. Like there was, I think, the Mexican Air Force, I think maybe the Italian, or was it the French as well, have been chasing these things. And again, as you say, they've just run rings around them and disappear. They've been turning off and disarming nuclear missiles. I've heard many tales of that kind of thing. That would really be a kind of a benign show of force. Look who we are and look what we can do, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, there's never been any attempt to sort of destroy us.
No.
But on the other hand, there's never really been any attempt to sort of really outwardly help us. It's kind of like I think we're sort of being given the message, hey, sort yourselves out, but we're not here to destroy, but equally we're not here to solve all your problems. It's like you've got to get your act together yourselves. It's like we have population problems, health problems, pollution, you name it. But the aliens, whatever they are, they're not solving that.
No.
But they're clearly, with abductees and contactees, they're often given messages about the importance of looking after the planet. But it does seem to be, that they're not here. I think whatever these entities are, for me, they seem to be, well, if the human race makes it, they make it. If they don't, well, that's how it goes, So.
Yeah. Or maybe they have landed and given us information, but the governments have kept it. Maybe that's why Germany was so far in front in World War II, and maybe that's why America's the lead in technology today, because maybe they did get a nudge from beyond, but just kept it to themselves.
Well, that could be the case. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me, if you're going to hide UFO technologies, then you're probably going to hide everything you know about these entities as well. So, it could well be that it's the full story, somebody knows it, but the number of people who know the full story and the full picture, could be like 100 people in some classified project or whatever, and that's it,
Yeah. I think we're probably about out of time, Nick. We want to quit while we're in front, actually, so we can actually say goodbye rather than just dump you.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully next time, if you want me back, we won't be sort of enraging ins and outs all every 10 minutes.
I don't know what it was, but for some reason I did check the weather for Dallas this morning, and I thought, that's going to be trouble.
I'm glad to hear you say that, Nick, because there was a couple of things that I wanted to talk to you about, and the Celebrity Secrets was one, and another thing is Face on Mars that I know you know a bit about.
The Sidonian one.
Ancient artifacts on other planets.
Save it, Basil, save it. Don't start again. I know what he's like last minute, and he always starts bringing up these things. Okay, thank you, thank you, Nick. And it's been brilliant having you on. We've had a few interruptions, but it's been great having you on. Hopefully we can get you back.
If you want me back, it won't happen.
Hopefully so. Hopefully so.
Wonderful.
Brilliant. Thank you for letting us call you in there, Nick, and hopefully we can get you back on again soon and talk about some more subjects.
Have a good and safe day, Nick.
Yes.
All right, thanks, guys. You too.
Okay, thanks, Nick. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thanks ever so much.
Wow, that was Nick.
Oh, Nick was great. I'm so sorry that the line was so bad.
Yeah.
And, but that's radio for you, folks. So
That's what you get.
see you next time on the Out There Hour
God,
at Alternative Future Radio.
I thought I did the sign-outs.
Sorry.
Yeah, demarcation, anybody?
You're listening to Alternative Future Radio, home of the weird, resting place of the paranormal. Will take you to the furthest reaches of the galaxy and beyond. Strange phenomena, aliens, psychics, cryptozoology, conspiracy, holistic health, and UFOs. Alternative Future Radio, where spooky just got weird.